creating.
in 5 minutes, but we could start without him.
Yeah, we'll start.
Okay.
Yes. We missed the pledge.
Okay.
Yes. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for coming. It's nice to see people in the audience and see that there's interest in what's going on. That's a good thing. We have a couple of small items on the agenda first, and then we'll go with our large FIMP BECD item after that. The first thing on the agenda is the Mill Road, Potunk Circle landscaping proposal. The board has seen the plans in the trustees room. Dragonfly has offered to take care of that circle and re-landscape it as long as we pay for the plantings. The plantings were extensive, let me put it that way, in my mind. I spoke to a couple of board members, and one in particular said she would like to get some other prices first. But at our next meeting, I plan to have a resolution on the agenda accepting this proposal with possible planting plans. I'll email you. Do you have any other comments right now before we?
Yeah, there's
move forward,
more I want
Chris?
to look into with the circle before we change the landscaping on it. So
Okay, well, the concept of repainting it, I think, is a good one. But the concept of putting in similar grass infrastructure in the perimeter, that would be very expensive, and I'm not sure it would hold up there, but we can discuss it further.
yeah,
Okay.
it's worth looking into.
And if we do move forward with the landscaping, the repainting of it should be held off until the end, so it doesn't get trashed, and changing the color and those kinds of things can be an option. So I guess basically I'm just looking to have a resolution on the next meeting of some sort that will pass muster, that's all. Okay?
Yeah.
So, all right, we'll get further input on that before the next meeting. Second item on the agenda is the Percy Street property bid. We had the property appraised. We put it out for bid. We received 2 bids. One bid was for $491,000, and another bid was for $600,000. It was an escalating bid, and I think at this point the board will reject those bids because they are essentially too low. And I would like to propose that we put it out for bid once again, but this time with a minimum bid matching the appraised value that we got.
Okay, I agree with that.
Okay.
No sense
And
not
the other
doing it.
thing that has happened is the road opening permit has expired, so I think we should ask our attorneys to reopen that road opening permit to keep that in place. And then
That
put it
also
out for
gets the
bid
value
again.
too, so.
Okay, so I'll have a resolution on the next agenda reflecting that as well. All right, anything else from the board?
Nope.
Okay. Next thing is the BECD FIMP project. The way I look at this basically is that things have evolved, and FIMP and FIMP has presented a situation, the Army Corps funding, beach renourishment, all those kinds of things, that results in an obligation for the village. And then the BECD is an option in how to address that obligation. I'm very appreciative that we have Aram Turchinian here to explain the evolvement and the history and the situation. And then we also have Kathleen Murray here from the town attorney's office to explain a possible way of managing this situation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Turchanian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. There are agendas and other handouts up here. If you didn't get them before, you can get them after. If there aren't enough, just let us know and we'll supply them. My name is Aaron Turchunian. I'm a coastal geologist and environmental scientist from right here in West Hampton Beach. In fact, in September, along with my classmates, I'm going to celebrate our 50th class reunion. So we're here to talk about the FIMP plan and the Beach Erosion Control District option. So what is FIMP? That's the first question. FIMP is the Fire Island to Montauk Point Coastal Storm Risk Reduction Project. And that's a lot of words, but in essence, the object of the Fire Island to Montauk Point project is to protect the barrier island from breaching and thus protecting both the barrier island and the mainland. So we've got a bunch of poster boards up here. If you look at the one on the left, this is a situation that FIMP is intended to prevent, such as what occurred in 1992 in West Hampton Dunes, and the black and white one in the middle, actually from the 1938 hurricane, when there were multiple breaches between Mauritius and Shinnecock inlets. So the object is to bolster the barrier island through the placement of sand. And the reason that that technique is used is because it's nature-based. In other words, barrier islands are made out of sand, and when you create a wide enough beach and a tall enough dune, that is what provides the protection. So overall, this is a $1.5 billion project. It also includes, in addition to the beach nourishment that I discussed, it includes elevating homes on the mainland that are within the 10-year floodplain. It's the only project of its type in the nation where both beach nourishment and the elevation of homes is taking place. So it's a unique project, and it's a pretty interesting project. And so it's a partnership between the federal government, the state government, the county government, and the town and village governments. So all levels of government are involved in some way, shape, or form in this project. The Army Corps of Engineers are the lead because they are the designers and they are the builders, but New York State plays an important role because they are what is called the non-federal partner. So every federal project has to have a non-federal partner, and that is New York State. And they supply funds and they supply expertise. And of course, then we have the county, town, and village governments, which is really where the rubber meets the road. That's where we are, where the project actually gets built, and there is a participation there as well. So what happened with the FIMP project, it's actually been on the books since 1960. But following Superstorm Sandy, the federal government authorized a 100% federal cost to do the initial construction of the Fire Island to Montauk Point project. And that's where the $1.5 billion comes from. So the way beach nourishment projects are done is they're done as an initial construction project and then what we call periodic nourishment. So there's a design template, which is what you're looking at right here. So how wide is the beach is going to be, how tall the beach is going to be, and this is the new sand that would be placed. So that's the initial project construction. And of course, erosion occurs and it's built into the design. This is going to erode. And so the rate of erosion will determine how often the project is renourished. In this particular case, the Army Corps has determined what they call a 4-year return period. So every 4 years, if it needs it, it's all condition based. If the beach is doing great, they're not coming. So if it's all condition based, if in 4 years it needs it, they will then come out, do the surveys, design the new project, and come replace and replenish the sand. And that part of the project is guaranteed for 30 years. And that particular agreement is called a project participation agreement. That particular agreement was signed just last week with New York State and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So not only is the 100% federal part of the project, which is the initial construction, but the 30 years of follow-on nourishment has now been agreed to by the federal and the state government and through sub-agreements with the county, town, and village governments. So that's what brings us here today. Well, before we get into that, I just have these other two boards up here, and there's more detailed handouts. The thing I want to stress in looking at this is, you know, the barrier island is a chain of protection that runs along the South Shore, and we are part of that chain. And so that is the context within which we sit. And I think it's important to understand, just like we learned a long time ago, you know, the weakest link is the one that's going to break. And that's why we want to make sure that our barrier island is at least equal to, if not better than, the other ones. But the 30 years of follow-on nourishment becomes with a local cost. And the way that that is structured is that the federal government pays 50% of all the follow-on nourishment. The state government pays 35% of that, and the local government, whether it's the county, the town, or the village, pays 15%. So that is the obligation that the local governments take on in order to get 85% of the project paid for by the federal and state government. There's a 15% participation. But really importantly, in the event of a major storm, if, for example, if another Superstorm Sandy came, the federal government will come and at 100% federal cost, they will rebuild the project to its original design standard. So this is a truly important part, and this is something that is something that is proven to be done. For example, it's not, oh, that might happen. It's called Public Law 8499. So this past winter, if you were reading Newsday, there was a lot of erosion on Fire Island. And Fire Island is part of the FIMP project because it's Fire Island to Montauk Point. And it dropped the level of the project below the standard to a significant degree. And they invoked Public Law 8499, and the Army Corps of Engineers came in and at 100% federal expense, rebuilt the beach to the design standard. So this is an important insurance policy. Once the project is built, and as long as you're part of the 30-year follow-on beach nourishment, then the federal government will come in and rebuild a storm damage project. There's a lot more that I could talk to about FIMP. That's kind of a very brief overview. Does the board have any questions or any points that you'd like me to bring up?
Anybody?
Yeah,
No?
Aram, I think you should bring up that though the federal government would accepts the responsibility in a big storm event, the money, the 15% has to be paid for like normal renourishment. Because there really is an obligation that's continuing that would not be picked up by a Superstorm Sandy.
Right, so that's a good point. So let's say we have a very nice 10 years and there aren't any big storms, but we get normal background erosion. And in year 5, the beach has eroded to the point where it needs to be renourished again because it's below standard. That is a regular nourishment, and for that, there would be a 15% obligation. If 2 weeks after that happened, there was a giant storm and it eroded the beach below standard, then the federal government would come in and rebuild it at 100% federal cost. But they're separate items.
And what we're talking about here is the separate item of renourishment and the financial obligation of the village to fund that, right?
That's correct. So that's what we're here to discuss today. I don't know if we want to take questions on FIMP now or let Kathleen go through the BECD and then do everything at the end. What's your pleasure?
If there are questions about FIMP, I think we should address what we're trying to, what obligation we're trying to fulfill first. So if anyone has a question for Aram, would you please come up to the podium, because we are recording this for the people that are not able to attend. So we would like them to be able to hear your questions. So please come up to the podium, ask your question, and then Aram could respond if that would be all right. Go ahead.
Good evening. I just want a couple of questions for clarification. So this is a voluntary participation program, or are we obligated to participate in this program?
We are obligated to participate in this program. The Board of Trustees passed a resolution early on to participate because we didn't want to be left exposed. So yes, it is an obligation.
And then the other question is the 15% match. It was a little unclear to me about, it said, I think you said something like it could be the county, it could be the town of Southampton, or it could be us. Are we exploring that division of labor, or is it just us?
Within the village limits, it's us. And within the town limits, if it's not a village, then it's the town. And Suffolk County, like Cupsog Beach, for example, that's a county obligation because it's a county beach. There's a portion between West Hampton Dunes and West Hampton Beach that's a town.
So anything within our village barrier
With our-
boundaries is
yes.
us, and then anything outside goes to everybody else. But there's
Exactly.
no,
They-
The
they
way-
get
there's
their-
no ability to get the town of Southampton or the county to pony up some of that 15%.
No,
The way it
that's-
works, can I interrupt?
Sure, go
The
ahead.
way it works is the 15% is divided among West Hampton Beach, Quogue, the town of Southampton. So we have a portion of that 15%.
Oh, so the whole 50% isn't us.
Not, it isn't ours.
Okay.
So we have a portion, Village of West Hampton Dunes has a portion of it as well. So there are different portions of that. Our chunk, I don't know how much it is, Aram could give a better estimate, but we have a chunk of the 15%.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it just, I think, useful to all of us to get a better
Right.
understanding of that.
Certainly.
Thank
And
you.
it's only if our 15% needs, I mean, our portion needs renourishment, then we pay 15%. If
No, we don't, I don't think,
West Hampton Dunes.
we don't
that's-
pay 15%.
Well,
We pay up to our portion.
right,
The
right,
whole 15% is divided
right,
among the other,
right,
us and the other municipalities.
That are getting the replenishment,
What?
right.
that are getting the replenishment
Correct.
also. So
Right.
they're also, like, the project would occur not just for West Hampton Beach, but a few municipalities together, they would do that at the same time. So that's what they're saying, is that costs would be divided because Quogue may need replenishment at the same time that we do, and they're gonna be here anyway with the mobilization, so that's why it's the same time.
Yeah, Brian McCarthy. This is really a question for Aram. The village has a good portion of the beaches already in pretty good shape. Because of the jetties. Did the Army Corps, and they're doing their, cost analysis, the cost has to, the benefit has to be greater than the cost. Did they take that into account in the village? In other words, can they come back later on and say, your beach is better than it should be?
Okay, I'll try to answer that.
Okay.
So the way the benefit cost analysis is done is they're looking at avoided damages. So any damage that would be avoided by a flood of a particular level. In this case, it's a 1 in 44-year storm. So the design of the beach and the dune is designed to withstand breaching during the 1 in 44-year storm. So the benefits accrue as a result of the beach being wide enough and the dunes being tall enough to withstand that type of storm surge. So they can't really take those benefits away from us.
Once they're locked in.
Once they're locked in, they're
Okay.
ours.
All right. So then the next question is then allocation of the 15%. West Hampton Beach is in better position in terms of beach erosion, and we're going to have to the trustees are going to have to reach an agreement about allocation. The allocation seems to be we're in better shape than a lot of the other beach communities. and that should be taken into account
Right.
in the allocation.
I also think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're only going to be charged for the amount of sand, right? Correct? That we actually use.
Yeah, I think that goes to Brian's point is that because we are in better shape, we won't need as much sand, and therefore we won't have to pay as much.
There you go.
Any other questions involving Aram? Yes, please come to the podium.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Joe Makis, and incidentally, my mother was in West Ham Beach during the 1938 hurricane, and it hit West Ham Beach, okay? And Main Street was flooded and everything like that. That's incidentally. But my question is, you're talking about the 15% the village would have to pick up. Can you break that down? Let's say you own $1 million home. How much would you be assessed for that?
Kathleen's going to get into that when they talk about the forming the district.
Okay, because right now, if we ever got hit with a 1938 hurricane, it's going to be devastating. You know what I mean? And if you don't know what about the 1938 hurricane, go on the internet, go look it up. You know, yeah.
Well, as Aram said, if it's a significant storm like that, the Army Corps would rebuild the whole thing at 100%.
Yeah.
The only thing that we're incurring, the 15%, is for, I would call it maintenance, renourishment. Is that accurate, Aram?
Deferred construction.
Deferred construction, maintenance, my terms. So, if it's a significant storm and there's a disaster of some sort, then the Army Corps will cover it 100%. We won't incur that 15%.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions for Aram? About FIMP or well, next is BECDs. I'm sorry, I'm morphing them already. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, Aram. Kathleen from the Southampton Town Legal Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening,
Thank
members
you.
of the Board of Trustees. My name is Kathleen Murray. I'm the Deputy Town Attorney for the Town of Southampton. With me, I'd like to acknowledge my boss, Town Attorney James Burke, and my colleague, Kelly Doyle. So in terms of raising the monies for that 15% cost, one tool or mechanism that the trustees can consider is the use of what we call a special improvement district or a beach erosion control district. Essentially, the New York State Legislature identifies several special improvement districts that municipalities are allowed to use, form, and create in order to raise monies for very specific purposes. Examples of that might be a lighting district, a park district, a parking district, and a beach erosion control district is also one such purpose. You can find these in New York State Town Law Articles 12 and 12A. So at the town level, we have established several beach erosion control districts. You may or may not have seen some of them in the paper. The Bridgehampton and Sagaponack beach erosion control districts were just reformed after a first 10-year project for a second 10-year project at the cost of $26 million. And there's a smaller beach erosion control district in North Sea. They tax themselves approximately $400,000. And there's a Tiana one that is just no large construction project, so it's much smaller. So in terms of wanting to use this tool to raise that 15%, it's basically something that the town is authorized to do, but the village is not. So the village trustees would have to pass a resolution if they were so inclined to authorize the town to form that district. And at that point, that resolution would be subject to a vote, to referendum if it was so inclined. And then thereafter, that process would be turned over to the town. And that's where myself and my colleagues, town comptroller, the town assessor, continue to work with Aram and the village board to establish that district. So I can oversimplify it and tell you that there are 3 steps in the forming of any special improvement district. The first step is the creation of a map, a plan, and a report. And basically that map plan and report is your engineering design. So much of that has already been determined by the FIMP process. But that's going to be specific engineering plans that discuss what that project is going to look like, the boundaries of what that project is going to encompass. So what are the boundaries of any beach erosion control district? That is something that we will take our guidance from the village board on. We will not be the ones to make that determination. That's a policy determination. So who is going to be part of that payment district? And the map plan report will identify that. And then most importantly, of course, the map plan report is going to identify the overall cost of the project and that engineering design, and then more specifically, exactly what that cost would look like for each property owner within that district. We propose that any tax would be based on an ad valorem basis, which is your assessed value. So usually we get a tax rate from the assessor and the comptroller, and then we tell you how much that tax rate is per usually typically $1,000. And that's where you can get a more clear idea of what you're looking at. So we're not there yet, but I promise you that if you decide to go forward, you will have that information before we set a public hearing. The second step is that public hearing, and that's your opportunity, if you are within those district boundaries, to be heard on any aspect of that district formation, including, most importantly, how much that cost is and what that might mean to you. And the third step is a resolution, assuming it gets that far, authorizing the creation of the special improvement district. That resolution is subject to a permissive referendum, which is to say, if people within those district boundaries are unhappy about that district formation, they can challenge it. And then it can go to a vote for everybody within those district boundaries to say yes or no as to whether or not they want to tax themselves for that improvement. Couple of extra pieces here. We would have to get approval from the New York State Comptroller's Office for the establishment of a beach erosion control district. And basically the state comptroller has an application where they're going to look at the affordability of this tax and what it means for each property within the boundaries of that district. So there's a good deal of information we have to provide them. Oftentimes they'll come back with questions, but essentially they're looking at affordability. And of course, that also depend on the bond. What's the bond rating at the time? What's the interest rate on the bond? So that will all be incorporated into that calculation. And thereafter, assuming for the sake of this discussion that the ECD gets established, then the town is the one who will tax the parcels within that district. It will show up on your town tax bill. There will be a line for the, let's call it the West Hampton Beach Erosion Control District, should that happen. And then you'll be able to see exactly what that cost will be. But again, we do work very hard when we're forming these districts because we do appreciate that you are taxing yourselves. We work very hard to identify as best we can what that value will look like before we get to public hearing. Does the board have any questions? Anything I can clarify?
Not at this point. We have, in other work sessions previously to organizing this meeting, we have discussed this concept quite a bit. So the board is pretty well informed. So this is important that we have a meeting in season because we were discussing this over the winter as well. So that's why we put out the mailing and had the meeting during July so that a lot of seasonal residents can come and be aware of what's going on. So primarily, I think at this point, the questions would be from the audience, if any, unless the board has something specific that hasn't been covered previously in the work sessions. Any audience member have a question for Kathleen? Yes, if you come to the podium, please. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but it's important for the recording that I have a feeling some other people will be viewing.
By the way, my name is Mike Petrelli. I forgot to say that in the beginning. Just more clarification. You had said something about like this is one of the choices to put in our 15% or a piece of 15% or whatever it is. Can you tell us what the other choices are? Is that going to be part of the process that you're going to be going through, so we know what the different alternatives are, or has that already been determined? And then just, I think, laying back to the other questions, I just think we need a lot more clarity in terms of just making sure what exactly are the obligations of the village versus the town versus the county versus, all of those different pieces, and then the district and all of those kinds of things. So we all have kind of a better understanding of what it is that we're being tasked to do. And then the other part is, I have a little bit of experience. Sorry, I used to work for the Port Authority, so I know a little bit about these kind of analyses and things like that. Do you also analyze what if we didn't do it? Because usually when you do those kinds of things, and I know that's more of an environmental impact statement kind of thing, but usually one of the things you do, well, what if you didn't do this? What would happen? So I think that's a good thing to know about. If the world would collapse, the barrier would be breached, and all sorts of hellish things would happen. I think that's something the people of the village should know about. So that's it.
That's a multiple question item. I think Kathleen can best answer what the other options might be.
Sure. So I think if, and please interrupt me if I misspeak, Mr. Mayor, but in terms of a mechanism for collecting that 15% beach erosion control district is one choice. The other choice is a village-wide tax, which would not involve the town. And the village could establish a reserve fund and identify how much monies pursuant to the powers of its village board to set aside for those purposes. So that's another mechanism. In terms of the cost sharing, again, I think I would just reiterate that the 15%, I too will use the word maintenance, though they're not supposed to. It is a maintenance provision, and I can say that if I believe if there is an event or if there's a renourishment and the town is not getting any of that sand, the town will not be participating in the cost of that renourishment. I'm sure that's open to discussion, but in terms of as we sit here today, we're not part of that calculation. If it involved town-owned lands, that's different. We can have a discussion. I will note there are exemptions under real property tax law as to who can be taxed in a beach erosion control district. And a municipal entity such as a county, a town, and a village are exempt from paying that tax. I will tell you that in the town of Southampton, in an effort to show good faith and in an effort to assume its pro rata share, the town has found the resources and the monies to pay for its pro rata portion of town-owned beaches that fall within the boundaries of those districts. So that's something that again will leave to your village elected officials to decide. But I do want to be clear that under the law, they're not obligated to participate in that contribution, so to speak. Does that answer your question a little bit? In terms of what happens if we don't do this, I'll leave that to Aaron.
That's a great question. And in the handouts, there's a link to the GRR, the General Reevaluation Report, which is about 32 volumes and about 4,000 pages long. But in essence, what it says is that the barrier island will breach as it has in the past, that the houses that are directly on the barrier island will be damaged or destroyed, and that there will be more intense flooding on the mainland. And those are what we call avoided damages. And so that analysis has been done. It's in the General Reevaluation Report for FIMP, and that's where the benefit cost ratio comes from. And in order for the federal government to proceed, it has to be greater than 1. So the benefits have to exceed the costs, and that is the case here. I also want to reiterate again, and I apologize for not making it clear in the beginning, the village is only responsible for sand placed within the boundaries of the village. If it's anywhere else, it's somebody else's problem. And the way the county comes in is on county-owned land. So, for example, if you go to East Quogue, the county owns miles of beach going to Shinnecock Inlet. They own Cupsog Park. So they're that they cover their 15% in that area. So everybody's responsible for what's in their boundaries. That's it. I would like to point out that this beach erosion control district is not a new idea. In fact, this is the primary mechanism for funding these projects all along the South Shore. So in Bridgehampton and Sagaponack, those districts pay 100% of the cost. So the $22.6 million that Kathleen mentioned, 100% of that is paid by those property owners because they didn't qualify for the federal project because the benefit cost ratio did not reach 1. Here we're looking at 15%, which from where I live is way better than 100%. And also, I won't speak for the mayor of Quogue, but there have been discussions about doing this in Quogue as well as West Hampton Dunes. There is a district already in Tiana, which is also part of FIMP. And on Fire Island, every community on Fire Island has a beach erosion control district and has for many, many years. So Ocean Bay Park, Point of Woods, Fire Island Pines, Water Island, Davis Park, Seaview, even in Islip and Kismet, and Ocean Beach and Saltaire, all of those have districts where they pay the local share. So I just thought that would make some good context. Thank you.
And I think to the point that what if we don't do anything? Think back to what happened to West Hampton Dunes when they had the major breach. West Hampton Dunes would not exist if nothing were done. Also, Montauk is constantly having to protect the lighthouse and its downtown area. So it's a constant effort to maintain the status quo with the beaches and the properties in those areas especially. The point was made that we are fortunate we have the jetties that help us out in some areas a great deal. And further west of Lashley, it's a little more susceptible. So there are a lot of variables, admittedly. But as has been said, if we don't receive sand, then there's no cost. And it's as simple as that. And it's our properties. Also, agencies, as Kathleen mentioned, I should mention places, things like the Long Island Railroad, they own property in West Hampton Beach. They will not be taxed. Suffolk County owns Cupsog. They will not be taxed. So it's the municipalities and the governmental agencies are not obligated under the law to pay this. But the town is paying a portion of for their own beaches. And I think the board has agreed already informally at this point to pay for, if there's renourishment needed at Rogers Beach, the village will assume that responsibility. And the same thing for Lashley, which is probably more likely. The village will assume responsibility for the Lashley Beach renourishment because it's a community resource. So I think we're together in that direction if a BCD is established. More questions? Okay, good.
There's been a lot of discussion about in terms of actually doing the replenishment projects and even the initial project about access and the use of easements or granting of easements and also potentially the use of eminent domain. This question might be premature, but what's the status of that?
All of the required easements have already been obtained when they first did the jetties in the 60s and the subsequent renourishment. So we don't have to do that in our stretch. That's already covered.
No new easements will be needed is the answer to that one.
Yeah, they're filed. Yep.
We do cooperate and have cooperated and will cooperate, I would think, with the Army Corps by allowing them to stage some of the project from Lashley Beach. So I think some of you may have noticed that in the past, that Lashley Beach has had heavy equipment there, and that's because the Army Corps is using it as a staging area for the renourishment project, usually further west of that area. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rand Manassi. Are there any special improvement districts like this already in West Hampton Beach?
In West Hampton Beach? No.
Okay. And is this restricted to the ocean only, or is this also bay properties?
We have many options to look into.
Okay,
In,
so
in
you'll be
that
looking
regard.
at that.
So that's yet to be established.
Thank you.
Yes.
One last question. I know how to quantify costs. That's easy. How do you quantify the benefit for each land that you put in the special improvement district to see if it's greater than one?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
My understanding is that there has to be a cost benefit greater than one.
Yeah, it's not on a parcel by parcel basis. It's based on the entire project.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's why we have experts. I don't know. Any other questions from anyone? Yes, please come.
I have a broken ankle, so I can't
Oh,
get up there.
talk loud.
My question is, you know, we've talked about the taxing of it. Are you going to be pre-taxing it and establishing a fund for this, or are you going to be taxing as a per needed? So is this a, you know, 5 to 10 year out, or is this an immediate tax attribution?
That's a good question. We're kind of talking about that right now. I can tell you in the other beach erosion control districts that we have formed, those have been primarily reactive to storm events or the depletion of a lot of sand in front of homes. So those have been, for example, in Bridgehampton, Sagaponic, they've taxed themselves $12 million up front, and then the construction of the beach is done immediately, and then that bond that the town puts up, that $12 million bond is paid off over 10 years, the life of that bond. Here, it's a little different. So we're talking about what that might look like if we tax immediately or if we get authorization for the bond, but we don't actually call the bond until such time as we need to replenish the beach. Because this is a little more, it's proactive in one sense, and it's also waiting. And I do understand, as I've been told before, that this village and these boundaries might not be as susceptible to storm damage as some other areas along the coastline. So we're talking about that. That's a good question. We'll have that answer before we decide to move forward to a public hearing and a map plan and report. Some of that will involve, obviously, the discretion of the village trustees. Um, so it might be up front, it might be over time. It's hard to tell at this point. Yeah.
One more question. So are the commercial versus residential going to be taxed at a different rate based on, because of the usage of the properties, or is it going to be based on, you know, square footage
It's
of the?
so it's proposed, it would be based on ad valorem, which is your assessed value. So if you're assessed as a commercial property, you're paying your tax based on that assessment, and for residential as well. And that is the most manageable way to tax a district. There is an opportunity to do a benefit tax, but that is a little more subjective. And we find that the ad valorem basis is much more predictable over time.
Okay. Any other questions? I should point out, if we do choose to go with the town BECD, that if we do choose to pay to bond, we do have the advantage of the town's bond rating for our borrowing rate. So the percentage rate would be the rate achieved by the town at the time. And this is also, it's a renourishment or a maintenance program that extends for 30 years. So it's predicting the future is a very difficult thing to do. So there are a lot of moving parts, in other words, and we are working on it. And as Kathleen has indicated, before we do anything, we'll put out the information, and it is subject to public referendum. So all those things have to be taken care of. And we hopefully have at least 4 years before the first scheduled assessment on if we need renourishment. So, correct, Aaron? 4 more years?
That's it, just like going to college.
Okay, good. Any other questions from the audience for anyone? Letting the wheels turn.
I just have a
Sometimes
question
my-
for Aram.
Okay. Oh.
So I know we talked about the 4 year kind of getting the assessment. I know that Lashley was redone recently. Maybe you can explain what to expect based on what we've had to replenish in the past of a cycle of how many years that would be, how many times we'd have to do it, just based on history of the area.
Yeah, sure. That's a good review. So, as I said a long time ago, way back in the beginning of this, everything is condition based. So it's not it's not a train schedule. You know, it's what is going on at the beach at any given time. So there's a lot of monitoring that occurs. So every October, the state and the federal government come out and inspect our beaches, and they do a fairly cursory inspection. Uh, they've been at it for a long time. They know what benchmarks. They pull people like me for each locality to go through, and they determine whether or not that beach looks like it needs to get resurveyed. And that's really the critical part of determining whether or not you need sand. So if you look at this diagram, you can see, most of the sand is below the water. Beaches are like glaciers. Only 10% of the sand you see is the beach. So when we have to do these offshore profiles in order to determine how healthy the beach is. So during that October, November examination inspection, a determination is made, looks pretty good, I think we're okay, or you know what, we should get out and survey this. Then that becomes the basis for, hey, do we need to do a project? And that from the time that it's surveyed to the time that the project gets done could be as much as 2 years. So there's a lot of advanced work that occurs. And many projects, even though they've got a 4-year schedule, have a 6-year return. So trying to, we got nourished after Sandy, and I think there's only been 2 nourishments since Sandy. So it's clearly longer than 4 years, but that is the nominal cycle, and that's what they use. But it's this annual, do the inspection, and then if necessary, start the survey process.
Thank you.
Yes, could you?
I just want to quickly say, Miriam McCarthy, 422 Dune Road. I do a lot of work in my home village. I want to thank you for all the time and work, because I know how much it is to be a trustee in Mayor. It's a
Oh.
lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, oh,
I have just another question. So the way that you're going to establish on who's going to be taxed is the Dune Road area and the floodplains, and you're going to assess it using like insurance kind of outlines, or how are you going to determine? I know one thing was the whole entire village, but on what is like the plan B in that? Just text me.
So the identification of the district boundaries is a decision that we will leave up to the local elected officials. So your village board will be determining what that village boundary looks like. That's not something that the town is going to develop. We're going to allow that to be stay in the hands of the more local municipality. For purposes of this discussion, if it was just the oceanfront homeowners within the village boundaries, then they would be taxed for a certain percentage or a tax rate based on their assessed value. Everything would be based off of your assessed value. Does that make sense? So like, we're not gonna be looking at insurance policies, we're not going to be looking at, it's simply assessed value. Does that make sense? Okay.
okay. Anyone else? Well, it seems everything is very clear then. So, I appreciate your coming, and we will be in touch. We will be discussing this on occasion at work sessions. The agendas are posted every Friday on our website, the Friday before the following Wednesday, so if you keep your eye out. It's very seldom that we spend the money on postcards to mail out to everyone, but we thought it was important for this meeting. Don't count on it happening again. I'm a cheapskate, so. Anyone else? Okay, thank you for coming. Need a motion to adjourn the meeting, even though it is a work session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.